The latest Highlands Fishing DLC shook up the economy a bit because it adds a new crop, a new animal, and several new factories with production chains. One of them really caught my eye. I was about to record an update to my economy series when I suddenly noticed a quarry that is powered by water. What is even more interesting, the stones go straight onto pallets, so we can set either direct selling or distribution to another brand new factory. And that is how a brilliant idea was born in my head. One I simply could not ignore because there is a bug in the game that makes this factory work like a money generator. I will talk more about that bug in a moment. So I created a new save to test my brilliant idea. I decided that land number 29, costing 65,000, would be the best for the job. However, as soon as I placed the mine, I quickly realized it was not an ideal choice. The terrain turned out to be quite uneven, and I still had to set up a little rice field, which, by the way, has a very interesting bug you will see in a second. After a short but rather annoying bit of leveling, I managed to set everything up exactly as planned. To pump water from the rice patch to our genius quarry, I used a wide water tanker so the range would definitely be enough. I also bought the cheapest vehicle to bring the tanker over, since at this stage every saving counts. After the purchase, I set off on a long trip to our freshly built testing site. When I finally arrived, I activated the water source and then fast forwarded time so the water could accumulate. Then I positioned the vehicle so I could fill and empty the tanker at the same time, which was supposed to ensure maximum efficiency for the whole process. The last piece of the puzzle was the stones. They are not particularly expensive, but to make the whole thing worthwhile, I decided to add the stone mason. Once everything was built, our test center looked truly impressive, like a small self-sustaining profit machine. In the stone mason, I selected roof shingles, and after launching the whole system, I could finally take a short nap. And that is when I was in for the big surprise. Our beloved grandpa, who always let us sleep for free on the base maps, refused to give us a bed this time. On regular maps, you can just go to sleep in a house even if you have not bought it. But in the DLC, there is no such option. You cannot sleep anywhere here until you buy your own place to spend the night. However, you have to admit the devs thought this through. Or put another way, they didn't remove that option by accident. They added tents as a new form of housing or temporary lodging. They're relatively cheap, just under $500. So it's a pretty nice atmospheric option. It's just a shame Grandpa doesn't like us anymore. So I took a 2-day nap, and to my surprise, but rather to yours because I'd already noticed it before, though I'll admit it still amazes me, the factory still had a full water tank. In fact, not just full, it kept refilling the whole time. This happens because even though the water source had dried up long ago, the tanker keeps magically filling. And the best part, it's not a new bug. This trick has worked for a very long time, so it looks like the devs consider it a feature, not a bug. In practice, that means one thing: we can sleep forever and the money will keep rolling in. And not just any money, about $15,000 per day, even in the worst sales months when the roof shingles price is scraping the floor. But that's not where my experiment ended. According to my calculations, one magic quarry should be able to supply more than one factory. So I fast forwarded another day and built a second factory. And just like that, besides going from millionaire to living in a tent, I also had a solid, very profitable business. Only one question remained: how profitable? So I decided to check and calculate exactly how many days it would take for the entire investment to pay off. After a year of running the system, I made about $260,000. Quick math says that after 4 years, we've got a machine that, in the worst months, earns around $20,000 per month. So the result is really quite decent, especially since on another save I saw a maximum roof shingles price exceeding $4,500. So that $20,000 is basically the minimum profit. And if we hit a good sales window, the profits can explode. But then the question pops up: does this even make sense? And I don't mean the mere existence of a quarry and a farming game. We'll come back to that later in this video, but how this method compares to the classic wind turbine, which sits in a category literally called generators. So I decided to test it. On a new save, I placed a beautiful, massive wind turbine, a real giant, for a total of $750,000. I set my balance to 0 and went into a long winter sleep, or more precisely, a 1-year nap. When I woke up, I saw the result, a profit of $254,000, so a bit less than from our wonderful water-powered quarry. The verdict seems simple then. It's more profitable to build a wind turbine, since it takes up less space, costs a bit less, and earns earns almost the same amount. However, I'm not exactly sure why, but when I tested the Quarry off camera, 2 factories managed to generate as much as 50,000 in some months. So it looks like the product prices fluctuate a lot and everything depends on the timing of the sale. Anyway, we shouldn't really be asking which is more profitable, but rather which makes more sense. Because honestly, I grew up in the countryside and I actually know farmers who built wind turbines on their fields. So in a way, that makes sense to me as a way to diversify gameplay and show that farming isn't just tractors and fields, but also investment in renewable energy. But in all my life, and I've traveled quite a bit, I've never heard of a farmer who goes to a quarry after work to mine stones. That sounds like something from a completely different game. And what's even harder to understand, why are we pouring water into a quarry and getting stones in return? It sounds like an idea from some absurd mod I'd normally showcase in an episode about the weirdest mods, but here we're talking about a full-fledged DLC and it doesn't seem like anyone is joking. Interestingly, the Farming Simulator 22 DLC also had something odd, iron. But at least there it made sense. You had to load it manually onto a trailer, transport it, and process it further. There was a production chain that had some logic behind it. But here, water goes in, stones come out, and even though I've been playing this series for years, I genuinely can't explain this logically. I can understand it in the case of greenhouses. At least that makes some sense. Although, instead of adding a fishing rod that most players will forget about after a month, it would have been nice if the greenhouses got a bit more depth. And in the meantime, we get a quarry that not only has almost nothing to do with farming, it is not even a brilliant business idea. And most importantly, there is no interesting mechanic in it at all. This is the point where even the most die-hard fans start to wonder whether the devs haven't mixed up the game's genre. Someone will probably say that by this logic, we could cross out half the factories in the game because what farmer builds their own factory? I disagree. There is a huge difference between a situation where the products we grew in our own fields, instead of selling them straight to the buy point, can be processed in our own facility, so we earn more on our own work. And to be honest, I can believe that somewhere in the world there are farmers who built their own mill to grind their grain into flour. Maybe they even went a step further and invested in a bakery to bake bread from their own grain. From seed to a fresh, warm loaf of bread, 100% their own work. That makes sense. That is production continuity, that is farm development, that is a farmer thinking like an entrepreneur. What I cannot imagine is a farmer going, next to my cornfield, I'll just put a quarry. That already sounds like someone is not quite sure whether they are making a farming simulator or a heavy industry simulator. Anyway, those are my first impressions of this DLC. And the episode I mentioned where I take a closer look at the more serious parts of the add-on, like onions, the new animal, and the other factories, will be out on the channel in a few days. So subscribe so you do not miss it, and as always, see you soon.